Good afternoon. I'm Michael Munson with Forge, and I'm joined today with Laurie Cook-Daniels, Forge's Policy and Program Director. The topic of today's January 2013 webinar is safety planning with transgender clients. We're really thrilled to have so many of you with us on the call today. I know I saw a lot of familiar names in the registrant list and also a lot of new names. So welcome to those of you who are new and welcome back to those of you who are joining us again. I want to remind people up front that we're not going to be covering Transgender 101 topics in today's call, but we have multiple webinars that are archived on our website that are specific to Trans 101 issues, and we encourage you to go and check those out at your convenience. So before we get started, I know that a lot of us work in anti-violence fields every day, and sometimes it can be really difficult to listen to, and this is an opportunity if you need to step out or if you need to take care of yourself in some way, we really encourage you to do so. The webinar is being recorded so that you can listen to it again later if things feel too uncomfortable right now or if you just need to step out for some other reason. One of the most common questions that we get is about the PowerPoints and if they'll be available afterwards. The answer is yes, and we will mail them to you as soon as we get done with the recording and can compile the information to get it sent out. Similarly, the archived recording takes a little bit of time to get that converted and up on the web, but generally within 48 hours or so, it's back up on the web and you can view it at any point after that. We're going to ask you today to do a little bit of interactive stuff with us, so there's going to be a couple of ways that you can do that. One is through the hands up tool, and so we'll ask you a couple times today to, if you agree with something, to raise your hand. So as you should hopefully see on the screen right now, there's a little hands up button with the little red arrow pointing to it, and that's exactly where you can do it. Do people want to try doing that right now just to see if that works? So I'm seeing lots of hands going up, so perfect. A lot of you found where that is. Excellent. The other way that we're going to have you interact is through the questions box. So again, you can see on the screen right now there's this big question box that's highlighted in red. You should see that on the right side of your screen. So we're going to have a couple of times where we're going to ask you some questions, and that's where you can type in the answers to those questions. This is also the area, if you have any technical problems, that you can ask one of us a question. I will kind of forewarn you that Laurie and I are the only two staff that are monitoring this area right now, so it may not be we might not be able to get back to you as quickly as we would like to. And we do have a lot of people on the call, so again, I apologize if we can't get to you right away, but we will do our best. I wanted to start out, before we get into safety planning, to tell you a little bit about what Forge can offer you as providers and what we can offer transgender survivors. For training and technical assistance, we offer four primary things for providers. One is one-on-one support. So if you want to email us or call us, we will respond to simple questions or complex questions and take as much time as we need to try to help you find answers that you're looking for. The second way is through webinars like this one. We're offering a monthly webinar series on a diverse range of anti-violence topics. So we encourage you to join us again next month. The third option is through training. We do a lot of conferences across the country, as well as some individualized trainings if people request us to either come to them or to try to create something special for them. And then the fourth option around technical assistance is publications. We have a lot of materials that are already on the web, and we'll continue to add to that that pool of information. What we can offer for transgender survivors is three things. One is a listserv, which is a peer-to-peer listserv, where survivors from any place in the country can communicate with each other, share what's going on for them, and gain support from other survivors. The second thing is referrals, and this is probably the primary area that we interact with both providers and transgender survivors. And we have a fairly large database that we can provide referrals to transgender savvy and trauma savvy providers that are across the country. It's not always a great match for people, but we at least have some place where they can start. And the third option is something that we offered last year and we're going to be starting again this year, which is a Writing to Heal group online. And because transgender survivors often have difficulty accessing support in their local areas, this is a way that people can get support in a very structured, very supportive environment, and they can get that support from anywhere in the country as long as they have access to a computer and a phone line. So those are the kinds of things that we can offer you. We recognize that some professionals listening today will be very familiar with intimate partner violence and with safety planning, and for others this may be fairly new territory. So it's likely, though, that most of you who are on the call, with the combination of intimate partner violence and safety planning and transgender-specific issues, all three of those things will probably be fairly new to you. So we're going to start with a brief overview of IPV, or intimate partner violence, and what safety planning is. We'll then talk a little bit about some myths and unique issues that are specific to trans people. And then we'll use 2 case studies to help give a little bit of perspective and answer some kind of questions that might come up in safety planning. And then we'll wrap up today's call with time for questions and answers. So we created a tool that can be used by trans people themselves who need to develop a safety plan, on their own, or that can be used with peers or friends to help them, or with providers who are helping them. The tool was uploaded this morning, so it's going to be available to you as soon as we're off the call, and I will email you all with the web link so that you can go to it directly. We're really grateful for the work that so many other agencies who have developed safety plans before have done. We're especially grateful to the Gay Men's Domestic Violence Project and to Outfront Minnesota, both of whom are LGBT anti-violence agencies, and we really borrowed heavily from their tools to kind of convert this tool to be more trans-specific. And we're also very grateful to the Office on Violence Against Women who make it possible for us to bring you these webinars as well as create tools like the safety planning tool and monthly fact sheets and other work that helps prevent and address abuse that transgender people face. I'm going to turn things over to Laurie for the next section.
Thank you. For many of you, IPV is a core part of your vocabulary. However, so many people from different disciplines are on this webinar, we'd like to briefly review some basic concepts. IPV, intimate partner violence, is known by many names, including domestic violence, family violence, abuse, and battering. Many think about IPV or domestic violence and conjure up images from awareness campaigns of a woman with a black eye or some other sign of physical harm. IPV is more than just physical violence. It can include sexual abuse or forced sexual activity, coercion, financial exploitation, stalking, blackmail, harassment, and/or emotional abuse. Abusers may try to isolate their partner from their normal support systems, friends, and routine activities. This may be a tactic of exerting control, but it can also make their victims more dependent on them and lower the chances the victim will attempt to leave. It may be difficult for some people to recognize that they are in an abusive relationship. Abusers may make their partners feel afraid at home or when they are together, and they may also try to make their partner feel chronically ashamed or worthless. As we'll discuss in a little while, many trans people are accustomed to people treating them disrespectfully and may not recognize signs of abuse since they are so used to others' cruelty. In some cases, the line between normal disagreements or tension in a relationship and IPV may be subtle. For example, a partner may say, "Let's stay home tonight and watch a movie, just the two of us." In some relationship dynamics, this could be a romantic gesture, while in others, it may be an attempt to isolate and keep the other person from seeing friends or being out in public. Similarly, some couples routinely have cycles of arguing and making up. For some, this is normal and healthy. Both are not harmed by this pattern, but for others, it is actually a cycle of abuse. Let's move on to talking a bit about the prevalence of IPV. Let's have a raise of hands. You can locate the raise hand button on the right side of your screen. Raise your hand if you think IPV is more common for people who are transgender. Okay, I'm seeing a few hands, which means that it's working, and there's a lot of people who aren't sure that it's more common. IPV is very common. Approximately 1 in every 4 relationships experiences IPV. This is true for people who are transgender and those who are not. This rate also applies to people who are heterosexual and to those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer. It applies to those who are younger and to those who are older. It applies to people of all demographics. At the same time, some research does indicate that rates might be slightly higher in some populations, trans people being one of those populations. One reason for rates possibly being higher for trans people is that many trans people grew up in abusive households or in school and social environments that were filled with hurtful name-calling and other forms of physical or emotional violence specifically related to their gender nonconformity. Some trans people may perceive this to be normal, how everyone relates to each other. Similarly, some trans people who grew up in abusive or unkind environments may think that they are lucky if they ever find love, even if that relationship contains violence. One of our jobs, all of our jobs, we believe, is to help remind all people, trans and non-trans, that they deserve loving partnerships that are free from violence or coercion. Anyone might be an abuser. Our society has reinforced the belief that only men are abusive and only women are victims. Although this belief was useful in the 1970s to raise awareness of violence that was happening in intimate relationships, we are now at a time when we can talk about a broader and more accurate spectrum of who abusers and victims are. Abusers can be female, male, transgender, or gender nonconforming. Abusers may be of any race, religion, or economic status. Abusers might be disabled or non-disabled. Very often, abusers were victimized at some point in their lives. This does not excuse their behavior, but rather it helps us all recognize what might or can happen when trauma is not addressed and treated. Again, anyone might be an abuser. There are some very common but mistaken beliefs about intimate partner violence. We're going to talk about 4 primary myths. Myth number 1, it's my fault. Victims often believe that it is their fault, that their behavior causes the abuser to lose control or act in abusive ways. This belief is frequently enhanced and reinforced by abusers, who usually blame their victim for provoking them. When abusers don't take responsibility for their actions, it also sends the message to the victim that maybe they, the victim, has some control over the situation. If they could just not do things to upset their abuser, the abuse would stop. When the fact is, abusers are responsible for their actions and it is not the victim's fault. Myth number 2, abuse is normal. The victim and/or the abuser may believe that the way they are interacting abusively is normal and to be expected, when the fact is abuse is not normal. However, some victims and abusers may not have ever experienced healthy relationships and so do not know that. Myth number 3, it won't happen again. Both victims and abusers may believe that an episode of violence or control was a one-time occurrence and that it will never happen again. This belief might be heartfelt on either or both sides, but it is usually not the case in reality. Frequently, abusers will apologize or tell the victim that it won't happen again. Other times, victims want to believe it won't happen again, so convince themselves that it was a one-time event. In fact, abuse in relationships is rarely an isolated event. Frequently, abuse will happen in cycles, and it will often escalate over time. Myth number 4, I'm not the right gender. Our culture, along with many others, has reinforced that it is domestic violence only when men are abusing women. When men are abused by male, female, or transgender partners, it is often not viewed as IPV. Similarly, transgender people on any gender vector or gender identity may not know where they fit in this dominant paradigm. Because they do not see media or hear discussion about intimate partner violence happening to all genders, they may not believe it is possibly happening to them. In fact, though, IPV can happen to anyone of any gender by anyone of any gender. So to summarize the myths, through safety planning, friends, advocates, and concerned professionals can help victims understand that these beliefs are dangerous myths and help the victim focus on where Z actually does have power and control, planning for and taking concrete actions that can enhance their safety. A safety plan is a set of actions a person can take to increase their level of safety while still living with or partnered with an abuser, while preparing to leave the abuser, and after a person has left an abusive relationship. Safety planning can be complicated, and thinking through many different components of what might be needed can be difficult. We have created a tool for trans people, peers, and professionals to use that helps provide a framework to create a safety plan that is unique to each person. This tool will guide people through key suggestions which will help the victim be more prepared to create more safety and less violence in their lives and in the lives of their children and pets if they have any. A safety plan cannot prevent abuse because that's under the control of the abuser, but it will provide the victim a thought-through plan that may reduce future harm. When creating a plan, a victim is far more likely to be successful at avoiding the worst by planning what to do ahead of time, preparing to carry out the plan, and rehearsing the action steps needed to create more safety. When we discuss specific components of safety planning we've outlined in the tool, please know that it was written for a wide range of situations. We believe it is important to empower people who are experiencing abuse by offering them ample information and encouraging them to make choices they think are best because they know their situation best and know what feels right for them. In the next section, Michael will talk about IPV issues that may differ for trans people.
All right, thanks, Lori. There are some unique issues, like Lori just mentioned, that are specific to trans people. We're going to highlight 7 of these issues today, and perhaps more of them will surface during the discussion where we have questions and answers. So the first unique issue for trans people is about the pervasive unavailability of services. Many services are for women only, which in practice often means serving only non-transgender women. Shelters, transitional housing, support groups, and other services may be extremely limited or not available at all if the victim is not a non-transgender man or if the victim is a transgender person of any gender identity or expression or presentation. A second unique issue for trans people experiencing IPV is the belief that their relationship is as good as it gets. Frequently, trans people hear from both general society as well as from others in the trans community that no one will love them. So when they are in a relationship, there's a belief that they better hang on to it since it's possible that no one else will ever love them, in quotes, again. Along the same line, many trans people believe that they deserve abuse. They may have been told from an early age that their gender is deviant or a sin, or they may have been told actually during childhood abuse that they deserved that abuse or continued abuse. Of course, no one deserves abuse, and no one should have to settle for a relationship that isn't healthy or free from harm. Some abusive partners use transgender-specific tactics. All abuse tactics are, of course, abuse, but some can be very specific abuse tactics that are used against trans people, and of course, some tactics can be used by trans people against their partners. Some of the tactics used against trans people include hiding or throwing away hormones or binders, clothing or prosthetics, eroticizing or fetishizing the trans person against their will, Claiming they are more politically correct than the trans person. So, for example, if somebody is lesbian or gay or bisexual, they may say that they are more politically correct than being transgender. Another tactic could be telling the trans person that they are not a real man or a real woman. Again, those are in quotes. Using trans-specific epithets or language like it instead of pronouns like he or she or z. Some of the tactics trans people might use against their partners include things like saying the abusive behavior is due to hormones, or forbidding their partner to talk about transgender topics with other people, or possibly even claiming that their partner's identity undermines or is disrespectful of theirs. We'll be spending an entire webinar on power and control tactics specific to trans people in April 2013. Violence often escalates when a partner is leaving or trying to leave an abusive relationship. This pattern is well documented and is true for all people. Trans people may face additional levels of danger that are not directly related to the partner's overt abuse. For example, an abuser may out a trans person in their work environment. Although this action is initiated by the abuser, the ramifications may extend to the employer firing the trans person due to this information. Laws are slowly improving across the country through municipal or state or city or federal protections, but trans people are still routinely fired because of their gender identity. Other trans-specific risks after leaving might include increased danger on the street. If, for example, a trans woman left quickly without her wig or without any other feminine clothing, which might be difficult for her to purchase, especially if she's of larger than average size, her physical appearance may increase the likelihood of street-based violence or ridicule or embarrassment. Additional risks when leaving may be the result of having incongruent identification that does not match the gendered presentation that the person is presenting at right then, or simply that multiple documents have not been changed to one consistent name and gender. Documentation incongruencies can result in denial of services like shelter or social services or orders of protection, harassment by police, or possibly even an inability to open up a bank account or other means of becoming self-sustaining. One core component of safety planning is to help people determine what are the critical items they wish to bring with them if they need to or want to leave an abusive relationship. Often these items include things like identification and money and keys and medications, those kind of basic things that most people need. Trans people may have additional essential items on the list that are unfamiliar to many victim service providers or advocates, or they may have items that might not be typically seen as essential but are essential for trans people. One example is a carry letter or name change document. A carry letter is a document created by a therapist or physician that states that a person is transitioning from one gender to another, if that happens to be the case for them. It can also state information about a former or current name or other information that may validate a trans person's existence and be helpful if anyone questions their gender identity. For another example, if a trans person is on hormones, these medications are likely going to be very important for them to pack. Similarly, any prosthetics or devices that help a person maintain the gender they regularly present as are vital to include. These items might be things like wigs or binders, hip or breast pads, packies, stand-to-urinate devices, razors, makeup, or clothes that may be difficult to replace, either due to the size of the person or because they're expensive. A bit of a side note here is that some people may wonder, well, why do we include razors and makeup on this list that are essential for some trans people? Many trans women, for example, have facial hair that will grow quickly if it's not regularly shaved and covered with makeup. Some trans women shave more than once a day or use specific kinds of makeup to cover any signs of what we would traditionally call a 5 o'clock shadow. If they don't have access to those close-shave razors or to makeup, they may have difficulty being perceived as female, which can then put them at additional risk to street-based violence like we talked about before. A longer list of what people may want to pack is on the safety planning tool that we've referenced. The smallness of community is another trans-specific issue. For people who are connected to the trans community, even in large cities, they're really acutely aware of just how small that community is. Word can and does travel quickly, and many people are in overlapping social or friendship circles. It can be difficult for one person in a relationship to access support from friends in the trans community if their partner was also an active participant in the trans community's events or activities. Frequently, both members of a couple or a relationship access support from within the trans or within the LGBT community. Organizations and individuals in the community may feel torn about who to support or how to pick sides, and some may even decide to slowly exclude both partners from the activities and support structures. Even some LGBT anti-violence programs have experienced conflict about who to serve, especially if both members of a couple seek services or support from that anti-violence program. In several cases, anti-violence programs have served the person who sought help first and turned away the person who sought help afterwards. Ideally, AVPs would have alternative resources for the second partner, and they would also engage in a screening process or an assessment process that would allow for both people to be served and access the support that they need specifically. We want to share two quotes with you that hopefully will help show a little bit about why the smallness of the trans community is an important variable. The first quote: "My partner's coerced, non-consensual sex with another F to M has fractured the local community into parties who believe my partner, parties who believe the perpetrator, and parties who don't want to take sides, who are perceived to not believe my partner as a result. Moreover, there's no useful way to clear the air or hold the perpetrator publicly responsible without some degree of ostracizing him. It's really an evil situation." So that was one person's response to kind of how the smallness of community can play out. Another quote is, "My trans ex and I are part of a very small trans community, and as a result of our breakup, I have become largely alienated from our community. He is a respected leader in the trans community. He spreads rumors about me." The seventh trans-specific issue that we'll talk about today is the mistrust of providers. The majority of trans people who are in abusive relationships will never reach your office or your agency or your organization. There is a deep mistrust of providers due to previous discrimination, harassment, denial of services, or abusive behavior from some providers. Previous webinars that we've given have highlighted some of the significant data that support the misconduct of these providers. It doesn't support the misconduct, but it shows the rates of perpetration from providers. So we encourage you to look at some of those other webinars if you'd like some details on statistics around the volume and types of experiences trans people are having with some providers. Because trans people have experienced so much abusive misconduct, many will not seek any kind of care or assistance. We'll talk more in the next month's webinar on creating a trans welcoming environment about how agencies can be more overtly welcoming of trans clients and start to build a positive reputation so trans clients can know they will be treated respectfully at your agency. Since many trans people may not access service agencies that are the most likely and the most equipped to help them, they might seek help from their friends or from a known professional. And that might be their therapist, a faith leader, maybe their primary care physician if they have one, or from trans support group leaders. Due to where trans people may seek help, it's important for a wide range of professionals and peers to be aware of safety planning and be willing to step in when asked or needed. Lori, would you like to lead us next?
Thank you. When most people think about safety planning, they think about physically leaving an abusive person or environment. Although this is often the ultimate goal for both the person experiencing abuse and for the providers or loved ones who know the person is in danger or experiencing harm, it can and does take a lot of preparation to leave, and leaving might not be the goal of the person in that relationship. There are many types of safety planning, and we'll talk a little about plans that lead towards leaving the abusive partner as well as how to stay safer while still in the home or in that environment. Safety planning may take place after a specific incident that raises a person's awareness that they are in danger and need to take action. Or the process of planning may start after the person slowly realizes that they are not in a safe or healthy relationship and need to make plans to leave. Safety planning can take many forms. We aren't going to go into detail about all of these forms since we created a tool you can download which contains many of the specifics. Let's just review a short list of some of the overarching areas people may choose to focus on when constructing a safety plan. Laying the groundwork in preparation to leave, staying safer at home, protecting children and pets, seeking an order of protection, maintaining safety on the job and in public, planning financially, creating safety in your new home, developing and strengthening ongoing emotional support, and improving cell phone, cyber, and technology safety. We're going to talk about the one area before we move on to discussing 2 case studies. Technology safety is an essential foundation to any other form of safety planning and staying safer. We no longer live in an age of Rolodexes and landline phones. Many people rely on their cell phones' address books as their lifeline to their friends and colleagues. Many also cannot imagine seeking information from a source other than their own computer or phone on the internet. In abusive or potentially abusive relationships, people need to be mindful of the risks associated with using technological devices or accounts that their abuser may have access to. When abusers are aware that their partner is seeking help or considering leaving, abuse may escalate. There are many techniques and strategies that can help people be safer online with their cell phones and through other trackable information, like devices with GPS capabilities. When possible, use public computers or a friend's computer to search for information or even to write email to friends or family. Secure a free or pay-as-you-go cell phone that does not have a billing trail the abuser can access. Create new passwords for email, bank, and any other types of accounts that would be difficult for the abuser to figure out. Pay cash instead of paying by debit or credit card. Paying cash eliminates a paper trail or a billing statement that may reach the hands of the abuser. Create a paper list of friends and contacts' phone numbers and addresses, and/or create a password-protected file, possibly only stored in the cloud and not on a hard drive, so information is available if the abuser confiscates or deletes contact information from phones or computers. Create a similar list of key account numbers, bank, credit card, social security number, etc., and store that separately. Many trans people, if they are lower income, may qualify for free cell phones with 250 minutes per month through SafeLink, and that URL is www.safelinkwireless.com, and we will send that out in the email that follows this webinar. In addition to no cost, they also don't have billing statements or require a credit check. A great resource to learn a lot more about technology and stalking is the National Center for Victims of Crime Stalking Resource Center. Their website has a large volume of information on stalking in general and on phone and computer tactics used by abusers, as well as solutions to help prevent technology-based abuse. Michael, would you please introduce our first case study?
You bet. So we believe that one of the better ways to illustrate safety planning and some of the things that people might need to know about is to share 2 examples. They're very different examples, and they'll bring up some different issues. So I'm going to read a brief case study. It's very brief, and then we'll go through a few questions to discuss it. So if folks are sitting back from their computer, we're going to ask you to be involved in just a minute or two. So here's the case snippet number 1. Taylor is a 16-year-old who recently left home due to parents who are not accepting of Taylor's gender nonconformity. Taylor was close to their high school English teacher. They had been sexually active with each other for the past 6 months, so it was logical for Taylor to ask to stay with her for a little while. The teacher agreed, but made the arrangement contingent on Taylor dropping out of school to allow for doing all of the cooking, cleaning, and other household work. So that's case number 1. So we're going to review 4 questions that highlight some of the issues that may be important to keep in mind when helping Taylor create a safety plan. So I know you all found the raise hand feature before, so raise your hand if you think that this is intimate partner violence. So is this intimate partner violence or not? I'm seeing lots and lots of hands going up. So that's great. It's not great that this is intimate partner violence, but we agree that this is intimate partner violence. It may also fall under many other forms of abuse or criminal misconduct if examined more closely. So, for example, is this statutory rape if the teacher's having sex with a 16-year-old? Might be in some areas. At what age are parents required to keep their children in school, and are there any parental consequences if the child drops out? Is there potential child abuse occurring from the parents to Taylor, in addition to intimate partner violence with the teacher? So there may be many forms of abuse that are happening all at the same time. So this time we'd like you to use the question feature. And so the question is, if Taylor wanted help in finding ways of leaving, where could they turn? So in the question area, could you type in where Taylor could turn if they wanted to leave? So somebody's writing in the DV hotline, shelter for teens, National Runaway Switchboard, crisis lines, youth resources, local support groups, school. So a lot of people are saying DV shelter. Lots of people are saying anti-violence programs, youth programs, lots of answers. That's excellent. Excellent. Legal aid is another one that's coming in, LGBT community center. Excellent. So there's lots of different kinds of things. People are saying friends. So there's a lot of answers that are coming in, which is really great. So hopefully Taylor can find some help if Taylor contacts one of those places. So if Taylor is in one of the 40 cities or so that there's an anti-violence program, an LGBT anti-violence program, they could call that anti-violence program and they could get assistance from them in finding housing, food, vouchers, clothing, or other services, possibly including foster care or residential care. And so, we would encourage someone like Taylor to call an LGBT anti-violence program first in an ideal situation, since they may be more likely to help. If there's no anti-violence program, like a lot of people mentioned contacting a DV agency. So could Taylor call a DV agency? What is likely going to happen if they call there? Ideally, everybody would be supported and served respectfully and competently, just like any of the other clients who are calling in. If they can't find help there at either an anti-violence program or a DV agency, they may reach out to, like some people had mentioned, homeless youth programs, or they possibly might reach out to their school. Of course, contacting their school may pose additional risks for Taylor, since the abuse may escalate at home if the teacher found out that Taylor had interactions with the school. So let's move on to question 3. So if Taylor wanted to leave, what living options are available? So if people want to type in the question again, so what living options are available? So I see that somebody's writing in teen shelters, residential youth housing, friends. So lots of youth shelters, group homes for youth. Excellent. So foster care, churches, transitional housing, LGBT shelters. Lots of great examples. CPS was another one listed. Excellent. Excellent. Well, one of the good things that we thought about when looking at this is that Taylor's age is really a positive variable. So somebody of Taylor's age is far more likely going to be able to access housing than someone who's 18 years or older. Many of the youth shelters welcome youth of any gender who are 17 or under. Some youth programs actually go higher than age 18. Many also offer supportive protection, things that are similar to what domestic violence shelters offer, so other people aren't able to follow them or find them. Some youth programs will house youth for a short period or a long period, or they can help youth get connected to longer-term housing, to back into educational options, maybe a different school, and help with skills building so that they're more ready to live on their own once they turn 18. And so for the fourth question, we're going to ask you to raise your hands again. So in your area, can Taylor apply for an order of protection without any identification document? So if you think yes, that Taylor can get an order of protection without identification documents, raise your hand. I'm seeing only a couple of people raise their hand. Okay.
Michael, we're also getting responses in the question.
Yeah, I see that too. So some people say yes, but it looks like the majority of you are not saying yes, and that is probably most likely true. Different states are different, so requirements for orders of protection can vary from area to area. So that might be true in some areas that Taylor could apply for an order of protection without identification, but a lot of times ID is needed. The key point in asking this question, though, is to see if you know what's required, and for you to start thinking about what might need to happen if a gender nonconforming person didn't have access to identification at all, or if they had identification that didn't look like the gender that they were currently presenting as. If identification is required for an order of protection, how can Taylor acquire that ID? Does it mean that Taylor would need to go back to their parents' unwelcoming home to get their birth certificate? If that's not an option, can Taylor request a birth certificate, but what if they don't have any other form of ID to get it, or if they don't have a permanent address? So there's a lot of questions that may come up around how can Taylor access an order of protection if there's no ID or if there's minimal ID. So those were just 4 questions that we wanted to kind of get people to start thinking about in terms of how to address safety planning. And we know that we brought up more questions than we really gave answers, but I think the hope is that by asking theoretical questions, it helps prompt our thinking about what kind of creative things that we can do with a client that comes in that may have needs that are a little bit atypical of what we usually experience. And before I turn this over to Laurie, I'm going to put the next slide up, which has an image on it. And I actually want to say a couple of things about this image before Laurie does the next case. I wanted to share just a little teeny bit, and that is that many of you know that we typically include a lot of images of trans people and loved ones in our webinars and workshops, and we always get permission before using any of the images. And occasionally I'll go back and re-ask somebody. I'll ask them again, is it still okay if we use your photo? Since sometimes people want to withdraw that permission, they just might not want to be having their face out there anymore. And I reached out to this person last week, and I shared with them how we wanted to use the photo in this webinar. And interestingly, he responded by sharing with me that he had been in an abusive relationship in the 1990s, and so he thought it was really fitting that his image be used in this context. He is a really amazingly beautiful person and a gentle person, and so he kindly gave us continued permission to use this amazing photo of him with one of his children. So I'm really grateful to know him, and I'm really glad that we can share this incredible photo with you. So Laurie, if you'd like to lead us into the case 2.
Michael always surprises me, and I didn't have that story before he just said it. So case snippet 2. George and Trevor have been married for 10 years. They married when George was still living as female, before he transitioned. George gave birth to their daughter Elizabeth 5 years ago, and then began his transition to living as male. George and Trevor have a long history of heated arguments. When George began his transition, Trevor wanted to stay home and not be seen in public with George. Trevor often shouts at George, "I don't want people to think I'm a faggot," before initiating sexual activity, including vaginal penetration, which George has made very clear he does not like or want. George has reached out to his friends at the trans support group. His friends have all told him how lucky he is to have a partner who stuck with him through transition, so he shouldn't complain. Again, we are going to ask a few questions to help think through some safety planning concerns that you might need to think about if you were the person helping George. Again, if you can raise your hand, in the case snippet we just heard, is this intimate partner violence? Okay, yeah, I'm seeing lots of yeses. We also believe it's intimate partner violence. Some of the components of intimate partner violence that we see in this brief synopsis include a history of arguments, which may or may not be overtly abusive, isolating attempts by Trevor to not go out in public with George, Trevor blaming George for creating a perceived identity. In other words, Trevor doesn't want to be seen as gay, but is blaming that on George. There is seemingly forced sexual activity, which directly follows yelling and blaming. The sexual activity is initiated against George's will and is not something that George enjoys. If you can go now to the chat and question area, please type in what trans-related items you think George might need to take with him if he left. Hormones, binding, packies, ID, children, medications, any documents. Great. Our answer is George would need to carefully consider if and how to take his daughter Elizabeth. Either way, if he leaves with her or if Elizabeth stays with Trevor temporarily or permanently, George will want to bring Elizabeth's birth certificate as well as his own. It is likely that Elizabeth's birth certificate shows that George is the birth mother or one of two birth/biological parents. If the mother's name on the birth certificate has been changed from George's former name to his current name, it will be critical for George to have the paperwork from his legal name change or any other court documents that prove he is legally Elizabeth's parent. George would likely also want to bring with him his hormones, testosterone usually, and needles if he is on an injectable form, as well as phone numbers and contact information for his doctor and pharmacy. Paperwork that shows his legal rights or status, such as home ownership papers, deed, etc., if he co-owns the home he and Trevor live in. A marriage certificate, since his marriage may or may not be challenged. A carry letter, surgeon's letter, or letter from a therapist, if he has those. A binder if he has not had chest surgery, and any prosthetics he may use, such as a stand-to-urinate device or packy. And he may want to bring business clothes, especially if he is short in stature or has clothes that have been tailored or shortened and which may not be easily replaced. So back to raising your hand. Would your local DV shelter take George? I'm seeing a few hands, not a lot. Many DV shelters would not take George because he has a masculine appearance and his documentation may all be in a male name and gender. Shelters or DV programs may be able to provide a 2 or 3 night hotel voucher, but that is often not enough time for a person to create a successful longer-term strategy for leaving a relationship. He may not have many less formal options either, since it appears that many of his friends believe he is lucky to have a partner who stayed with him through transition. It is possible, though, that one of the friends from his support group would be willing to take him in for a while if they understood the magnitude of the situation. George, like Taylor in the previous case, may want to contact a local LGBT anti-violence agency who would be the most likely to be able to help him and his daughter. Again, this case snippet was just to get you started thinking about what you may need to learn about your local requirements and options in order to help trans survivors.
Great, and I'm trying to advance the slide so we can move on. We have 3 take-home messages before we'll do some question and answer time. So the first take-home reminder is that traditional services may not be available for trans survivors of IPV. So many shelters, transitional housing, support groups, or other services are often limited to women only. Working closely with your client and being creative in finding solutions is essential to helping them stay safe or safer and in less danger. The second reminder is that you don't need to be an expert to help. And knowledge is really a great thing. Obviously, we're doing webinars and, knowledge is really, really wonderful. And many of you on this call today are already IPV experts and are well-versed in safety planning. But we know that not everybody will seek help from the people who are experts, from you people. So safety planning can be done by the person who's experiencing the abuse, either alone or with a friend or peer, or with a trusted provider or community member. If someone reaches out to you and you don't feel like you're an expert, that's okay. Your help may, though, be the life and death difference for this trans person who's in an abusive relationship. So the tool that we created and that is freely accessible online will help guide you and the trans person through some of the things that you'll want to think about. And the third take-home is it takes a village. And it's kind of similar to the concept of being an expert or not in IPV. We believe that it takes a village to help reduce and minimize or respond to abuse and violence. Trans people often don't trust mainstream providers and may seek advice or support from people they know. Sometimes that person that they know might be you because they just happen to know you, or they might know of a certain place in their community. Sometimes trans people will reach out to whoever they feel is safest and who they feel that they can trust the most. Again, that might be you. So if you see that somebody is possibly in an abusive relationship, it's really important to step up and gently ask. And if somebody seeks you out and asks for help, please take the time to offer it. Since trans people may not access services traditionally designed for IPV victims, we all must play a part in recognizing, stepping in, and assisting individuals to move into places of greater safety. So we've got a lot of time left. We weren't sure how much interaction and how much time would fill that up. So I know I saw a couple of questions as we were moving through, and Lori's going to help me gather the questions so that we can address them. And if folks have more questions, feel free to start typing them into that questions area.
Okay, the first question I see is, can you explain what is meant by eroticizing against the trans person's will? And Michael, while you think of an answer to that, if you asked a question earlier and we did not answer it while we were going, please re-ask it again right now.
Okay. So eroticizing a trans person against their will, I think that a lot of people are slightly familiar with at least a lot of times we see fetishized or objectified trans people, people that are not wanting their transness to be something that's eroticized. Unfortunately, a lot of pornography or erotica uses trans people in ways that are not necessarily consensual, and partners can do the same. So it might be focusing on something that the trans person doesn't like if it was a male to female trans person, their partner could eroticize it against their will by saying, oh, I love the fact that you have a penis and you're so feminine. And that might feel really offensive or abusive to the trans person. I saw another question when we were doing some questions around what is a PACI? And it's a very simple answer for that. PACIs are generally things that transmasculine people use to create a bulge or a prosthetic penis.
Okay, another question is, do many of the LGBTQ anti-violence programs offer shelter? My understanding is a few offer shelter, most work with mainstream shelters. Michael, did you have any other comment on that?
I don't know that. I don't know what the number is for sure, but I do know that the AVPs across the country are probably the most well-connected to where shelter is that trans people could access. So I think it's worth networking with the AVPs to find out what they know and who they're connected with.
The other question I think is a follow-up. Would that be sexual coercion?
To the eroticism?
probably.
Yeah, I think that would be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. What can advocates do on a system level to start actively advocating for the rights of trans folks? Any suggestions?
Lori, I think that you have a good answer to that one.
On a systems level, one of the questions that I think is really critical is the systems barrier to trans people is often the same exact barrier to male victims in general, which is the system is set up for female victims of male perpetrators. So even beginning to ask the question, what are we doing for victims who are not female, will begin to help shift the whole system. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next. Similar situations happen with Asian women, Latino women, etc. And that is absolutely true. That I believe that may be referring specifically to the eroticizing against someone's will. I also had a posting earlier that I followed up on. There is a, it's going to take me a minute to find it. There is a shelter on a DV agency on the North Shore of Massachusetts that is all-inclusive in all of its services. They have a 24-hour number at 800-547-1649. I asked what their catchment area was, and the answer was Salem, Gloucester, Beverly, Lynn, and Saugus, and I may have mispronounced that. Next question, Michael. What about therapists who are themselves LGBTQ or have a large part of their practice that are LGBTQ?
I'm not sure that I'm understanding what the question is in that.
Maybe the asker could write something more and then in the question box and help us out with that. Meanwhile, we'll move on. What is the best way for us as community advocates to show that we are supportive of LGBT and gender non-conforming individuals? Michael, I think that's our next webinar, isn't it?
It is our next webinar. We can do a couple of brief answers to that right now. Next month's webinar is on creating a trans-welcoming environment for agencies. There's a lot of small signs that can happen, small things that can happen that can kind of tip trans people off to it being more welcoming. Some of those include some of the really common answers, which are like having safe zone stickers if your agency has been trained in LGBT issues. Having gender-inclusive bathrooms is a huge issue for trans people. So, I mean, I'm not talking about shelter right now. I'm just talking about like more traditional mainstream social service agencies. So having a bathroom that trans people can safely go to is really important. Having policies that show really clearly who's included or not included in services, and then having all staff know what those policies are so that people can get consistent answers across the board. Those are just a couple of comments or suggestions.
Okay. Next question. Where can we get the National LGBT IPV Services List? To my knowledge, there is no such list. There is a list of the LGBT anti-violence programs that are a member of the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, and that list is available at www.ncavp for National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs.org.
And
Next question.
If I can comment on that, I'm not sure if there's a referrer to that. They've just redesigned their website. And so if you go to avp.org, you can find NCAVP's list from that, from avp.org.
It does have a referral.
Excellent.
At this point.
Great.
Do you have any ideas for how someone may go about recovering identification documents if they lose access to them?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what the ID documents are. I know that some states are using, like for driver's license or state IDs, photos that they keep on file, which is helpful if somebody goes in. I'm not sure what's required though, and I'm sure that it's going to be a state-by-state difference. and what those kinds of requirements are, or what kind of ID that they've lost access to. We can look that one up too and provide some more information on that.
I do think it's state by state and it's identification by identification. For instance, the birth certificate is going to be handled most likely by a city or county official. So I think it's going to vary. Does the law support the rights of trans individuals in regard to child custody issues? Mm-hmm. The answer to that is it varies. This is an area of the law that has not been firmly established, and as a result, courts have ruled various ways in terms of child custody. Next question, how will we be able to find the recording of this webinar once it is put online?
It will be off the front page of our website. We'll also send you a link in a follow-up email where you can find it, so you'll have it. You can just go to the website and you can easily find it, or you can look at the email.
Okay. What should advocates be mindful of if advocating for a victim in the emergency room getting a forensic rape exam?
Lots of things. It doesn't give a very good answer. I think that one of the critical issues, Larry, did you want to go ahead and start with this one?
No, I think that this one's too big for this particular webinar. Mm-hmm. We are planning on doing more on this.
Let me offer a brief comment, though, on it. I think that one of the most important things is to work directly with that trans client, and that's going to be true for forensic exams or any kind of interaction that an advocate's going to have with somebody. So it's really about talking with the trans client about what they want and how they want to be supported, and that's going to be your best guide as to what you need to do.
Okay. Next question. What suggestions do you have regarding working with shelters typically reserved for cisgender women, which means non-transgender women, to offer shelter service for trans individuals? Do you want to add something to that, Michael?
I think it's an uphill challenge for a lot of people who want to try to advocate and who are advocating for trans women to be included under that umbrella. That was a question, right? Is how to help get trans women included under the women-only shelters? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it takes a lot of relationship building and patience and reminders. Those are not very strong answers, but I don't think there's any magic answer to moving forward. And some people are a lot more willing and open to that than others. I think a team of people is also useful, like if there's an AVP in the area to have more than one person coming in or one advocate coming in and saying, let's try to change this.
Next question. Where can I find support groups for LGBT people living with violence and/or AIDS? Is there a national resource list?
I don't think there's a national resource list. A lot of the LGBT anti-violence programs do have connections to support groups, so that might be, again, a good place to start, and I know we're going to keep on referring people to LGBT anti-violence programs, but they oftentimes have a lot of information that can be shared really easily. A lot of cities, someone mentioned Boston before, Boston, Massachusetts area, there's some support group options there. We just heard that the DC Rape Crisis Center is starting a trans-specific group for sexual assault, not domestic violence. So there's some stuff going on around the country.
I'm going to start the answer to this one. When is an individual legally considered to have made the transition for the purposes of accommodations? This is legally going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There is no consistent law that says, oh, it's when you've changed your birth certificate or it's when you've gotten a court-ordered change. So there's no legal response. Michael, do you want to talk about the practical answer to that?
Right. I think people a lot of times use legal as implying that there's some one magic way, like Larita said. And I think what the real question is how does somebody qualify for a service that's based on gender? So it might be, does somebody have a driver's license in the gender that the service is offered for, or does somebody have a gender presentation? that matches the gender segregated, sex segregated service, things like that. So it might be around driver's license, it might be around how somebody presents their gender, it might be literally around surgical status, which is really not what we recommend at all for dividing people, because surgical status is not really anybody's business other than the person whose body it is.
Next question, what about services for undocumented trans couples who are in IPV relationships? Forge does not have an expertise in immigration issues. Michael, do you have any specific referrals you would send people to on that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, my immediate response was like, it makes it even harder. I mean, it's harder being undocumented, it's harder being trans, and it just, magnifies the difficulty in accessing services. We can see if we follow up. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you aware of prosecutor or law enforcement specific training tools for working with trans survivors of IPV? At this point, we are not aware of any. There's a piece that's still in the works with the Office for Victims of Crime that we're hoping will be published in May. Mm-hmm. Any response? Any more on that?
Well, I'm thinking about, this is a slightly tangential, but Just Attention International is working with, I believe, the Dade County Police Department or Sheriff's Department, and they're looking more at prison rape, not DV. But I know that in Florida they've got a lot of momentum around trans survivors of some form of abuse, and I think they're focusing on sexual assault. But I think some law enforcement agencies are trying to improve their services, and I'm not sure how much of that has been codified yet into a manual or a training video.
Next question, is there a best way to help create a sector of local domestic violence shelters that can help trans survivors? I think that the Forge position is generally we need shelters that will serve victims of any gender, not just trans survivors. One of the things that is currently going on is an effort to amend the Violence Against Women Act when it is reauthorized to make discrimination against LGBT people not permissible under VAWA. That would help the situation. Any comments? More comments?
That's great. That's great.
Okay. Where can we get a copy of the trans safety planning tool you created? Thanks for creating it. Are you going to create one for safety planning for trans survivors of non-intimate partner sexual violence?
Good questions. Right now, if you go to the Forge homepage, it is listed on the it's on the front right. Actually, let me see if I can do this while we're online. Go ahead and do another question, and I'll see if I can find it.
Could you talk about the possible treatment trans people may experience at a traditional GLBT center or within the community, not just trans? That is going to vary from community to community, and it's going to vary from individual to individual within the community. Trans was one of the latter groups that was added to the LGBT umbrella. There is still a lot of transphobic beliefs and attitudes within the LGBT community. And on the other hand, there's been tremendous progress. So it's going to vary from place to place, and it's also going to vary from individual to individual. Some people think their communities are just fine, and other people in the same community don't. Okay,
and so,
do you have any, I'm sorry.
On the screen right now is where you can find the safety planning tool. So if you just scroll down a little bit, it's on the right side. It says latest publication, and there it is. So you can click on the safety planning tool, and it should open.
Okay. Do you have any additional tips with helping create plans for youth under 18 leaving home?
Lori, can you answer that?
I was afraid you were going to bat that back to me. At this point, no, I do not. There are a number of groups that work specifically with trans youth. there's a website at transfamily.org. There's Trans Youth and Family Association. Is that what it is? www.tyfa.org. That may be helpful.
I think a lot of the LGBT community centers across the country also have youth programs associated with them, and they might be helpful as well.
The next question is, can you post the phone number and the name of the all-inclusive shelter program, please? I'm actually seeing a number of people posting that they are trans-inclusive, so we will compile those and send them out after the webinar is finished. Where can we get these stickers you just mentioned?
There are different places. Some people have a safe zone training that they go through, and they get literally safe zone stickers from the training that they've gone through. Lori, do you have a comment about that?
No.
Okay, because there are other kinds of stickers that could be, LGBT friendly or LGBT allies, anything that indicates that your agency is welcoming. So literally any sticker that you can find that shows that is a good sign, as long as your agency really is friendly and welcoming.
Next question. Do you see cases of abusive partners trying to control the other person's gender identity and or expression? Yes, absolutely. And even in a few cases, it's a transgender person trying to control the gender identity of their partner as well. So just because we're trans doesn't mean we get the issues and avoid being controlling. We now have clarification on an earlier question, and the point was not a question. The participant is saying there are therapists that work with IPV and LGBTQ folks, and those therapists are also a resource.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I think where you can find some of them, just to move on about like, well, how do you find those people? There are community health centers like Fenway in Boston, or Howard Brown in Chicago, or Tom Waddell in San Francisco. There are places all across the country that have community health centers that have LGBT therapists on staff or physicians on staff, and obviously there's a lot of other LGBT providers across the country that are not affiliated with those programs.
The next comment is, I would call the National DV hotline and ask for agencies that are all-inclusive. And that may work, but I'm not sure that there's been a national survey, so that would not be a complete list. And there would be, I think, a number of agencies they wouldn't be able to answer the question for. Mm-hmm. Next question, are there organizations that may be more connected to transgender individuals where we as advocates can get involved? Michael, do you want to take that?
I think we've talked a lot about that already. I mean, I think that the LGBT AVPs are good places to get involved. I think LGBT community centers are good places to get involved. Therapists that are identified as trans inclusive might be good places to network with. Those are the immediate things. I mean, trans support groups are excellent ways to access transgender communities and community members.
Okay. Someone asks, how difficult is it to get new identification documents in general?
In general, I think the answer to that is it depends on how much money you have. It's not terribly difficult to do in most places, but it costs money in most places. Generally, people have to go through a legal name change if they want to change their name, and then go to the DMV or wherever else they want to change their name. I know in Wisconsin it's around $300 to do a court-ordered name change, and I think that's fairly typical across the country. So finances are usually the issue.
Do you know any sound research about the prevalence of IPV among the trans community? I have problems finding good statistics about it.
Gretchen Kanegi, and I might have just mispronounced her name, has done some research on trans IPV, and I don't know that she's done prevalence statistics. I don't think she has, actually. but she might be a good person to read some of her articles.
Do you know how folks can start an anti-violence center? We are concerned that we don't have one close by. The resource for that would be the New York Anti-Violence Project, and that's, you can Google that. They are the home of the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs and have a program specifically about helping states develop new, or regions develop new LGBT anti-violence projects. One thing that is important to remember as advocates learn how to serve trans survivors better is that most of the things that an advocate needs to do and remember in order to serve trans folks is the same that they need to be doing for all clients: mirroring language, believing and affirming experiences of abuse, asking the person what is important for their safety, empowering them to make the safety plan, not doing it for them, and meeting them where they are at, non-judgmental even if you don't understand someone's experience. And I think both Michael and I would say that is a really good summation.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. Definitely.
Okay. Can you please comment on challenges trans individuals come across when the person identifies differently than the original birth certificate? For example, difficulty in explaining this to the shelter. Is there anything that could be recommended to trans individuals to make this an easier experience or situation? Would it be helpful, for example, for individuals to have a certificate from a doctor that states they have had surgery?
Yeah, that's actually something that we mentioned earlier on, which is what a lot of trans people call a carry letter, and it does kind of help smooth that process a little bit. So if there's a birth certificate or a driver's license that's potentially in a different name than the person's going by, or if their appearance looks different than their birth gender, that carry letter is going to say this person is transitioning or moving from this gender to this gender, or from this name to this name. So I think that can be really helpful to have that, you know, with the person at all times. I know some trans people have shrunk the letter down and laminated it and put it in their wallet or their purse. So that's another way that kind of it stays preserved and on the person's person all the time.
There's a comment that I would like to hear and maybe see a webinar focus on undocumented immigrants, LGBT immigrants living with DV and SA, and we will pass that request along to the Office of Violence Against Women. Is there a specific number that we can call if we come across a trans client who is also a victim of human trafficking? I think that that answer is probably going to be a local answer. I don't think that there's a national resource, but if someone has a national resource, perhaps you could put that in the question area. What do you recommend as the best practice for qualifying trans victims for sex-segregated services?
That's a touchy issue, I think, for a lot of people. I don't know that there's a best. I think that a lot of trans people would like to not have there be any segregation at all. I think that we're leaning, and Laurie can step in at any point in this, we're leaning to services that are sex segregated to acknowledging however the trans person is saying that they identify their gender. So if they come in and they say, my name is Jane and I identify as female, that would ideally be what the shelter or segregated service would see them as, regardless of what their ID is, regardless of their surgical status, regardless of their overt appearance in general.
I have a comment here to a previous question. Undocumented victims of violence have specific immigration relief possibilities through avenues such as U visas and under VAWA. What do you know about limitations that trans victims of IPV may experience if they are formally incarcerated or have a criminal record, or any resources specifically for people with this experience?
I think this is a little bit outside of our knowledge base, but the two places that I'm thinking about as referrals are Sylvia Rivera Law Project and the National Center for Lesbian Rights. Oh, I'm sorry. This was
mentioned before, and I think you answered it, Michael, are you going to work on a safety plan for trans survivors of non-intimate partner sexual assault?
I think that it's a great idea, and I think that we will definitely put that on our task list of things to consider for the next year. That's a slippery answer, but that's a yes, that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. How would you recommend LGBT people from small communities in domestic violence cases trying to seek shelter? For example, people who live over 6 hours from a larger city. I think the rural question is a problem even for people who are not LGBT, and I'm not sure that we have advice yet on that. We are thinking about trying to do a webinar specifically on rural trans people in the future. Michael, did you have any more comments?
Yeah, and I agree with Lori that we don't have a lot of knowledge, and I think the situation is very similar for people that are trans or non-trans or LGBT or straight. And I know also, though, that a lot of communities are being funded or have projects that they're trying to figure out what to do with LGBT people in rural areas. So it's definitely made it to the radar screen of a lot of communities across the country. And I'm really hopeful that some answers will start to kind of unfold as communities figure out better solutions.
Another question about, is there any ongoing training for law enforcement officers responding to DV situations with trans victims and or perpetrators? If so, what does this look like?
There doesn't seem to be not very many agencies across the country are doing awareness or training for law enforcement. We're seeing that some communities are, but it's really minimal, and oftentimes it's not necessarily very culturally competent or culturally relevant. There's been a couple of articles. There was a mainstream article that just came out a couple of weeks ago that wasn't bad. We can include that in our follow-up as well. It was written by law enforcement about working with trans clients.
Okay. Michael, this is for our further for us later on. Check out the victim services fact sheets on the Forge site. They are great. Is there a place on your site that we can download all of them at one time rather than searching for each one individually?
That's a really great suggestion, and we will tell our web designer to do something about that.
Okay. And I have further follow-up for the persons or the people that are looking for the National Trafficking Hotline. The URL is www.polarisproject.org. The number is 1-888-373-7888. But the inclusivity will be agency specific, so we will also send that out with our follow-up.
Lori, why don't we do one or two more questions and then we'll wrap up?
Okay, this is another law enforcement. Can you speak on the issue of interacting with law enforcement as a trans person and how advocates can engage in safety planning around this? We often recommend that if a trans person wants to engage with law enforcement, that they go in with an in-person advocate. This tends to cut down on problems. I don't know if we have anything specifically more on that.
I think I'd like to add that I think a lot of trans people don't want to deal with law enforcement at all. So what we're seeing a lot of times is that trans people are seeking care from service providers, and they're saying, you know, I don't want to call the cops. I don't want to have the police involved. What can you do for me? So we're really encouraging providers whenever possible to respect that and to find creative solutions that don't involve the police. Some police are great, so you know that's not a comment about the police. It's a comment about the trans people's needs or desires.
Okay, the last question I'll ask you is, how do we find information on future webinars of this kind? Found it to be helpful.
Excellent. You can find that information directly off the homepage of our website, which is forge-forward.org, which you'll see like on the screen that's up right now. My email address, the half of it, is the website. So you can click there and you can see upcoming webinars. Like Lori mentioned before, the next one is going to be on creating trans welcoming environments, and then we do quarterly webinars that are Trans 101s.
And I want to report that 236 of you, and that's not counting those of you that have many people in the room, 236 of you hung in until this very last moment, and we want to thank you for that.
And let me just go through 5 quick things as reminders before we close today. One is we've talked a couple times about you'll receive the PowerPoints and some other materials as follow-ups. The safety planning tool is on the web right now, but we'll include the link to that in the follow-up email. The recording of this whole webinar for all of you that stuck in and those that you didn't will be on the web within 24 or 48 hours. And we really appreciate your feedback, and so as soon as we close out today, you'll get a survey. I think it's a 5 or 6 question survey, and we'd really love to hear your opinions because we value it and we take those things into consideration when we plan for our next webinars. And the next webinar is on Valentine's Day, so February 14th, and it is on creating a trans welcoming environment. So thank you everybody for sticking with us and for participating and caring about transgender survivors. Have a great day.